Earth was running out of options. With the zombies breaking through to the east and going around the forces in Israel, they were clawing their way through multiple countries at breakneck speed. Many country leaders hoped to slow down the horde with more and more airstrikes and bombing runs. Hu Jintao, who had already sent in many of his troops, was no exception. Besides the horde, the virus itself continued to keep spreading, soon hitting the first countries in Europe. In the south, various countries had fallen due to a zombie uprising from within. Scientists urged the threat of the virus itself being as much of a reason to fail as the physical horde itself. The world was turning desperate. The world was turning scared. There was a divide in what to do next. Some believed that the humans just had to hold out. With each passing year, new and better technological warfare could be constructed, eventually making men so powerful that they could obliterate the zombie threat with ease, since they only consisted of flesh and bone. But there were those who had no faith in waiting, and saw that that very same time was running low. They pressed the importance of using nuclear weapons to wipe out immense parts of the horde. Many members of the GDA were against this, as the land and soil would be turned to wasteland, never to be used by man again for many decades, maybe even centuries. And so men did what men do best. They quarreled amongst themselves as they differed of opinion. Nothing was being done. The front in Africa was stuck, and the many forces stationed in Israel were completely surrounded. They had the docks as an escape route, but many refused and continued to fight on. Every day, the stranded soldiers from countries including Lebanon and remnants of the Egyptian army went from door to door in search for small packs of zombies they could take out. All throughout the day, mortar fire, artillery strikes and tanks could be heard, as resupplying the armies was not an issue due to the proclaimed dockyards. The men lost all sense of time and connection to the rest of the world, where every day survived seemed like a victory, and friendships between strangers from different countries were as easily made as ripped to shreds by the zombies. With the situation being so desperate, the higher-ups in Holland agreed to speed up the planned invasion on the west coast of northern Africa. Though some of the divisions had not been fully stocked yet, they were mostly sent to establish a new front and dockyards for more countries to enter Africa. Michiel van der Laan would take control over the light armor and motorized divisions. And thus, the migration towards the harbors in Spain and Portugal began. Some of the vehicles traveled by road through Belgium and France, while troops were being shipped. They hoped to relieve some of the heat that the soldiers from many different countries were dealing with in Israel. Some of the zombies had reached the border of Turkey as well, but no report of direct contact had been made yet. Turkey's forces stood at the ready. At the end of March, the Dutch soldiers had almost reached the ports of Portugal and Spain. Next up would be the preparation for the invasion, which would also take several days. The situation looked bleak, as the zombies mauled their way through Syria, Iraq, and Kuwait with ease. In the south of Africa, things had calmed down. Some believe the uprising from within the fallen countries had scrambled the hordes that now needed time to regroup before heading deeper southward. Plans for the naval invasion were in progress. The army under lead of Nico Geerts would hit a harbor to the west of the Indian front line. The units would then move north, east, and south to establish a connection with the Indian forces and capture more dockyards. Preparations would take 42 days. Michiel van der Laan would approach Africa from a south position, hopefully being able to establish a connection with Gabon and capture dockyards that were plentiful in the area. Their preparation time would consist of almost half a year, and they would function as a flanking attack maneuver in case Geert's army found itself stuck by a wall of undead. The Middle Eastern countries needed to hold out for a little over a month. Many trusted that they would hold, but some leaders, like Iraqi President Saddam Hussein, had little trust in the invasion of Holland making a big difference. Russian President Vladimir Putin set his focus on ports in the east. It was a long way around to reach Africa this way, but he had spent the previous months so much in the west that not much more could be built there. Germany, trying to be the conductor of Europe's military movements, set its gaze on intercontinental politics as more countries from other continents needed to get into the war faster. President Chirac, like many other leaders, saw an opportunity to improve the air force in hopes to slow down the zombies with bigger and better aircraft. Syrian President Bashar al-Assad had set a focus on dockyards before the attack with the zombies happened. Some believed he might have wanted to build new docks to start evacuating Syrian higher-ups, as he did not believe the war could be won. Others thought these were mere conspiracy theories. Australia, much like Britain, was surprisingly absent from the war. There were even protests in multiple cities to refrain from entering the war, as many citizens felt safe and far from the threat here in Australia. Kim Beazley proposed to recruit more diplomats with a similar state of mind, as Beazley did want to enter the war and take part in the fight that could very well be mankind's last war. In the south of Africa, things had heated up again, as the zombies attacked different fronts after having regrouped. In the north, the first Brazilian troops had arrived, establishing a position with German and Japanese troops. Brazilian President Cardoso assured that many more troops were on the way, and that they were ready to deploy troops when the western invasion by the Dutch would occur as well. Saudi Arabia, to many surprise, had found itself recovering and even regaining some lost ground, as the zombies seemed to have thinned out at the front. Though exact reasons were unknown, some thought they were called towards the bigger hordes to the north. Though losses were taken all over the place, the speed at which the zombies had advanced had drastically depleted. At least the soldiers had managed to get a foothold. And so the weeks went by. The Dutch had settled in for a little over 3 weeks, some being nervous and others being more positive. The areas in the west had almost no zombie activity, making heavy combat an unlikely scenario in the first couple of months. With the war continuing, the bodies kept piling up as well. 2.5 million zombies had already been killed, but they still had 10 times as many that were a threat. America, Russia, and China suffered a combined casualty number of over 500,000. The optimistic spirit of the people back during Christmas had all but disappeared. In the north, more and more Brazilians had arrived and moved the German front a tiny bit south. At the border of Iran, the first skirmishes with the undead had erupted as well. From afar, bouldering artillery rained down hell on the zombies, reducing many of them to dust. And then, on the 25th of April 2003, a nuclear bomb was dropped near Jerusalem with devastating consequences to the land. It decimated a horde of zombies over 150,000 strong. Who authorized the strike was unknown, as communications with the Middle East were scrambled. Some said it was the Russians, others blamed India. The truth in the matter was that though the nuclear strike did take down many zombies, the horde was only slowed down by a small margin. Due to the nuclear fallout, many soldiers had to retreat, whereas the zombies remained unharmed. Some skeptics even implied that the radiation might result in mutations making the zombies stronger or, God forbid, faster. The nuclear attack seemed useless, as the undead menace continued to spread. Politicians were furious, pointing fingers to one another, some demanding more nukes to be dropped. The downfall of mankind would always be, as described by many authors in the past, by his own doing. And then finally, on the 11th of May 2003, the invasion army of Nico Geertz set out to assault the shores in the west. And their invasion came right on time, as the zombies managed to bite their way through a narrow passage deeper into the territories of Iran. It would still take a week before the ships and crew were in position, but then, on the 18th, the Dutch had finally set foot on African soil and managed to get both an airfield and a dockyard back. The claimed land was small in comparison with the others, but at least it gave mankind some long-awaited good news. In the coming weeks, the Dutch would spread out in all directions to get as much land back as they could, prioritizing dockyards and airfields. In the first 10 days, they made good progress, but were surprised that no other country had backed them up yet. Further east, the first of the Dutch troops had encountered some of the zombies and were ordered to halt. At the same time, news got out that the first of the Brazilians had arrived, with the Russians soon to follow. China was waiting in line as well, as the Dutch bravely continued to spread and claim more territory.